Today, we're diving into the pretty incredible world of internet forensics. We're going to follow the digital breadcrumbs that get left behind every single time we go online, and we'll see exactly how investigators piece together a crime. So let's get into it.
This is the big question, right? It's what every digital detective has to figure out. See, unlike a physical crime scene, an online crime doesn't just happen in one spot. The evidence is scattered all over the place, often hidden in plain sight across this huge, invisible network. So, where do you even start looking? Well, there's a whole field dedicated to answering that question, and it's called internet forensics. It's really all about sifting through the technical guts of the internet, what they call the infrastructure, and all the digital clues, or artifacts, that get left behind. This is for crimes that happen on the internet, like hacking, and crimes that happen with the internet, like identity theft.
Okay, so what does this digital crime scene actually look like? It's definitely not a single room you can just cordon off with yellow tape. No, it's way, way more complex than that.
The best way to think about it is like a triangle of evidence. You've got clues on the suspect's computer, you've got clues on the victim's computer, and then you have this entire trail of evidence left on the massive network that connects the two. An investigator might only get access to one piece of that triangle, but they all tell part of the same story.
So, with evidence all over the place, where do you start? Well, the first thread that investigators almost always pull on is the same: the IP address. This is the starting point for pretty much every online investigation.
An IP address is basically a digital street address for any device connected to the internet. Every little piece of information that gets sent is tagged with one, telling the network where it's supposed to go. For an investigator, finding this address is the absolute first step to figuring out the physical location of a device. But, just knowing the address is only half the battle. Investigators also have to understand how data actually travels from one place to another. It's almost never a straight line. It's more like a journey across this incredibly complex web of digital roads, all governed by some very specific rules. So data travels in two main ways. Think of TCP like registered mail. It's a bit slower, but it double checks to make sure every single piece arrives and in the right order. That's absolutely crucial for things like loading a web page or sending an email. UDP, on the other hand, is like a standard postcard. It's super fast, and if a few pixels get lost in your video stream, it's not the end of the world. The priority there is all about speed. Now, how does your computer even find those IP addresses in the first place? It uses something called the Domain Name System, or DNS, which is basically the internet's giant address book. When you type in a website, your computer asks its local provider, which might then ask a root server, which points it to another server, and on until it finally gets the right IP address. It's this incredible hidden process that happens in just milliseconds.
And if we zoom out, the entire internet is really a network of these massive networks called autonomous systems, or AS for short. They're run by big universities, corporations, and internet service providers. So when you send some data, it doesn't just take one direct road. It actually hops between these huge systems with routers constantly figuring out the shortest and most efficient path to get where it's going. And this system is unbelievably powerful, but it can also be pretty fragile. I mean, check this out. This quote shows how one tiny mistake can have massive global consequences. A network admin in Pakistan made a mistake trying to block YouTube locally, but because all these systems talk to each other, that command basically spread like wildfire across the globe, knocking YouTube offline for everybody. Okay, so we've seen the network, the big highways of the internet. Now let's zoom way in on the evidence that can be found on a suspect's own device. And we're going to start with their web browser. Unless you're really diligent about using private or incognito modes, your browser is basically a forensic treasure trove. It keeps a history of every single site you've been to, it stores bits and pieces of websites in its cache to make them load faster, and it saves cookies, which are just these tiny little files that websites use to remember who you are. And this right here is the aha moment for an investigator. It might just look like a totally random URL found in a browser's cache, a bunch of garbled text. But look closer, because information is encoded right there in the URL. It reveals a username, the exact forum they were on, the specific action they took, in this case a post, and the exact time it happened. It's a perfect digital fingerprint of an action, all hidden in one line of text. But of course, the people investigators are looking for, well, they don't usually want to be found. Adversaries use some pretty sophisticated techniques to cover their tracks and make this kind of detective work incredibly difficult. One very common hurdle is something called NAT, You see this everywhere, like at a coffee shop or a university. Basically, everyone on that local network shares one single public IP address. So, if an investigator traces an IP back to a university, they now have the lovely job of trying to figure out which one of the thousands of students on that network is their suspect. Then you have the much more deliberate stuff, like onion routing, which is what powers networks like Tor. As you can see here, it's a whole different ballgame. It wraps your traffic in multiple layers of encryption and then bounces it between random computers all over the world. By the time your data gets to its destination, it only sees the IP address of the very last computer in the chain, which makes tracing the original user extremely difficult. But, and this is a big but, that anonymity isn't foolproof. There was this famous case where a student sent a bomb threat to his school using Tor just to get out of an exam. Investigators checked the campus network logs, and it turned out, at the precise moment the threat was sent, there was only one person on the entire campus network using Tor, him. His attempt to be anonymous is actually what made him stick out like a sore thumb. So, where is all of this heading? Well, as technology evolves, the digital crime scene evolves right along with it. And that means investigators are constantly having to adapt to brand new sources of evidence. The next big frontiers are already here. You've got the blockchain, which creates a permanent public ledger of every single cryptocurrency transaction. And then there's the whole Internet of Things, which is turning everything from our smartwatches to our refrigerators into potential sources of evidence, each creating its own little stream of data. Which kind of leaves us with one final big thought. In a world where every single device is becoming a potential witness, constantly logging our movements, our activities, our conversations, the digital crime scene isn't just on our computers anymore. It's all around us. The real question is, where will investigators have to look next?